All right. So we're going to talk about the next step in the journey. So we just heard from developers and getting products down, and now we're going to hear from the healthcare system. So from innovation to collaboration and partnering, how do you get a product placed in a facility? So that's assuming you're developing something you don't intend to exit by selling out after you do clinical trials, and what you're going to do with that. So we have 3 different panelists to talk about this from 3 different perspectives. Our first panelist is going to talk to you about the clinical trials. Our second panelist is a physician who also has been very involved in product placement locally. And our third panelist, very concerned about the patient, is a supply chain officer who has to look at the return on investment side of it. So we'll start off with Dr. Frank Rosinia from John Peter Smith, and we'll let you introduce yourself and just tell a little about your perspective on our topic.
I know that this campus is engaged in breast cancer awareness. I saw pink bras everywhere. So I'm full on now and happy to be here. So my role is I'm the John Peter Smith. I'm an Executive Vice President and Chief Quality Officer, and I also have a faculty appointment. I'm a professor in health policy at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And I moved to Fort Worth 2 years ago and to help start the medical school. And you just heard from Dr. Stewart Flynn this morning, so we are kind of torturing each other, trying to get this thing lifted up. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we want to do to help promote this clinical trial work. And when I read through your bio in North Texas, the words that like popped out to me, and they just lifted off the page and got my attention. To create like this rich ecosystem, for acceleration and for growth of life sciences. That's like a very romantic mission. I love that. But from where I sit, and what I see is in my ecosystem, which is Fort Worth, for us to lift off and accelerate the growth of clinical trials, we need it to look different. We need to look very different, and especially if we're going to meet the expectations, of the economic impact forecast for this new medical school. I don't know if Stuart mentioned it this morning, but it's a big number with like lots of zeros. That's what my daughters think I earned. So they go shopping with my credit card. But it's a big number. And when I listen to Paul Umbeck deliver that message in Fort Worth in mid-April, it started off with this research piece. So we're talking about research, about clinical trials, and for that to lift off and that to become more than a social conversation on a beautiful campus or in another venue, work had to be done so we look differently. And what we thought was top of the list was to create a single multi-organizational IRB. So only the federal government could put like single and multi in the same sentence and get away with it. But I'm going to call it a regional IRB. So we set up and we are live and legal as of September 1st, and we will be open for business next month. We started with the University of North Texas Health Science Center, North Texas Regional IRB. And the idea was if we have single IRBs across Fort Worth, if we have just single IRBs and we want to bring clinical trial business into our community, it doesn't match up with like a rich ecosystem. That's a sick ecosystem because what you're asking private principal investigators to do is to jump multiple hurdles for IRB approval, and they'll lose the business. Because being competitive for clinical trials, you can't just be a really good principal investigator. You can't just be good on the pre-award. You have to execute well and sharply, and we were not poised to do that. So September 1st, we started our regional IRB, and it is North Texas Regional IRB. And we have going to be here on this campus, and I get to come back again during Breast Cancer Awareness Month and talk to the IRB people here. So it'll be our second conversation. So we'll form this relationship with this wonderful university. I've gotten the opportunity to walk through the research labs. It's been beautiful. So that's going to be a rich ecosystem. Earlier this week, with another university partner that's supporting Dr. Flynn's medical school, there's 2 universities. We are working on making them a structural part of this IRB. So all of a sudden, we start to look different as opposed to like a single JPS IRB. Here's a hospital in the IRB business. That's not good. So we partner up, with universities that do this stuff well. We partner up with another university, and it begins to resemble a rich ecosystem for us to be able to lift clinical trials, which begins to approximate the big number that you heard this morning from Stuart. So I'm going to stop there, and you've got some really wonderful people sitting next to me, and you want to hear more from them than me.
Now we want to hear from all of you. So next, we're going to hear from Dr. Ignacio Nunez, and he's going to speak from the perspective of a physician and also a very active person in Texas Health Resources, obviously a very large network here within North Texas.
First of all, let me begin with perspective, because I think I bring a different perspective to your group. I am a graduate of this university. I went to Southwestern Medical School, and I've been in private practice as an OB-GYN physician here in Arlington since 1983. And I belong to a multi-specialty group called Family Healthcare Associates, and my office is just about 2 miles from here, so it's pretty easy to get here. I am, at the present time, the chairman of the College of Science Advisory Council here at this university. I also am chairman of the board of Texas Health Arlington Memorial Hospital. I'm also chairman of the Physicians Policy Council of Texas Health Resources, and I've had a lot of other leadership positions in my hospital as well as Texas Health Resources. So I've also, at the present time, I'm the medical director of minimally invasive surgery at Arlington Memorial Hospital. So I have lots of people coming to my office or coming to the operating room trying to get their products in the door. I also have people come to my office like any kind of a drug rep, new medications, new laboratory tests, new equipment. And I was asked to kind of be up here to bring a slightly different perspective from the implementation side of how you guys actually get your product out there to get used. And I think as we go forward in this conversation, I've just got a lot of little thoughts, a lot of insights about how this might work. Things like, for example, when not to talk to a doctor, when to really bug me, how to bug me, how to present your product to me, trying to understand the supply chain side, the budgeting side. How in the world do you get your product in front of a larger corporation that's actually going to use it? So that's my opening statement.
Okay, and last we have Mr. Tony Johnson, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Supply Officer at Baylor Scott & White Health. He actually was brave enough to move this area in July last year, hottest time of the year. So he's new to our community, but after 14, 15 months, probably knows quite a bit about what's going on in North Texas. Tony?
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm delighted to be here. And I'm Tony Johnson, Senior Vice President and Chief Supply Chain Officer for Baylor Scott & White. I'm responsible for optimizing the available resources to make sure that we get the absolute best supplies, equipment, and services to treat our patients for the Baylor Scott & White system. So I'll start off, I'm a little biased. I will say if you want to get your products and services into a health facility, find out who's controlling the money strings as a part of what you do, because everything will converge there. And so as the supply chain executives, we are the guardian of the dollars. In a sense, we're not the final decision makers, but we have a lot of influence on what happens when products come in. And we're not just looking at finding the cheapest product in every place. We have very astute clinical members on our teams. We're sitting on every physician council and every service line council in our health system. Someone from my team is meeting with the council pretty much every other day to discuss clinical issues, so we're very much integrated. Our job is to, number one, look at the resources that are available. We do have bumper guards. It doesn't matter how good the technology is. There, from a practical point of view, we only have so many dollars to work from, and the other job is to be a part of the conversation, to ask the tough questions. We have clinical efficacy tools. We're not physicians. We don't claim to be. But we do have tools that give us the research on products and drugs and devices, and we have comparative literature, we have comparative cost, and we bring that information to the table to sit down with our physician colleagues and with our administrative colleagues to just be a facilitator in that dialogue as to how do we deliver the absolute best care that we can with the funds that we have. And oh, by the way, here are the dollars, here are the parameters that we have. So I'll stop there.
Let me add something to that.
Absolutely.
You know, I gave a talk last night to freshman students here at UTA regarding how I got paid. And one of the things that I brought up in that conversation was the concept of healthcare systems across the United States moving from a fee-for-service type of environment to a fee-for-value type of environment. And doctors across the country, and in the marketplace we're in right now in Dallas-Fort Worth, we're probably about 20% fee-for-value, and that's a long, complicated discussion, but in other parts of the country, they're already 65, 70% fee-for-value. And the further along that this marketplace moves into that type of a financial marketplace, it's going to get harder and harder for you guys to get your products in front of the people that want to use them. And so part of what you have to understand is a budgetary process. I can tell you that both my healthcare system and I want to make clear, I don't work for Texas Health Resources. I'm an independent physician. I do a lot of work for them on a sort of a subcontract basis. I own my own practice. But part of what the healthcare systems across the nation have had to do is become more efficient. I can tell you that in this marketplace, some of the large healthcare systems have to cut $500 million out of their budget and to tighten their belts by that much. Now imagine trying to tighten your belt by $500 million. And what's that going to do to your products and how you present them? And I think that's important for you to understand that that's what's going on across the entire country. So it's harder for them to make a decision. So when you bring your product to a physician, you need to find the right physician champion that's going to be able to have some tie-ins to people like him. If you just take it to any general surgeon, any orthopedic surgeon, any oncologist, and they don't have a tie-in to the system, you're at a dead end. If you really want to expand what you're going to sell, find the right physicians, have those conversations, get the products in front of the right people, because no one today has the authority on their own to say, I want this product. I can remember, I've been in practice over 30 years, I can remember the days when someone would bring a product into the operating room or my office and I'd say, yeah, I want that. Guess what? They bought it because I wanted it and I needed it. And that doesn't happen anymore. It's not the way of the world. We're very fee-for-value conscious.
I'm gonna pick up on that. I completely agree with you. Those are excellent points. And what we've done at JPS to bring a more structured conversation about bringing equipment, about bringing new technology into our organization is the one-off conversations with physicians that would chase people down in the hallways with informal conversations that left an ROI discussion, off the table because people were both attending to different business and they just happened to run into each other. you know, that informal conversation, it failed, you know, good products that wanted to get into our organization. It failed the physician champion that thought this was value, and the administrator felt cut short. And so we set up this capital equipment committee as part of our medical staff with our chief operating officer on there to formalize the process. So, you know, vendors can have a seat at there. When they bring something forward, they've got a really structured, formal committee process to take and look and how products are evaluated. So, you know, have an awareness of, like, you know, the hospital you're going into, you know, what they've set up, you know, that may make a difference about what you do and how you do it. I mean, it's changed the way we do business, and it's improved. And I think we've had better success bringing products that match what our needs are. And the other thing I've seen is a friend of mine is in Dallas, and he's got this really nice piece of software I like. And for my business, you know, as chief quality officer, I said, you know, Ruben, I'd love to see you come and show this to our frontline people that are trying to take and reduce our length of stay. And you know, his demo with the frontline people was above their heads, and it didn't work. You know, so just know your audience also. I mean, these are like fundamentals, but this is a really smart person with a good product, and it cost me a cycle in the budget. So FY19, we get to look at it again, but he didn't make 18. So just a couple things that I think about as we're having this discussion. Thank you.
I know you have something to say, Tony.
Okay. So another basic tip that I would have for you is to find out what the needs are. I mean, that's very simple. You would be surprised at how many people come in to say, I've got this device or this widget to sell, or I'd like to bring into your organization, and it has no relevance to what our needs or what our struggles are. And you'd also be surprised at how many times we're having back office conversations about where can we find a fix to do this. I told you our supply and service budget is $1.5 billion a year. So we're going to spend $1.5 billion with someone doing the right thing, but every dollar is to solve a problem. From my perspective, if you can figure out a way to help us solve that problem, and one of the first steps is to just ask us, you know, what problems are you trying to solve? I can assure you out of that $1.5 billion, there's probably 50 or 100 million of need that we have where we're scratching our head like, how do we do this? Where do we get this from? And if I were an innovator or bringing new products, I would want to have those conversations all the time. And my background is military. I was supply chain there, also healthcare, and we had the exact same problem. Everyone was trying to sell us all kinds of devices and widgets, but no one ever asked us, you know, where our pain points were. And we had hundreds of millions of dollars of need that sometimes went unfilled because there was a mismatch between the true need and what the market had available for us at the time. So I would think about that.
Well, you know, we talked about clinical trials, and clearly they're really important, but then you also mentioned a piece of software that I think could also be very interesting, because sometimes the value of a product is enhanced by it reduces time in surgery, it reduces length of stay in hospital, but everybody wants to say that in the vendor world where I came from. And so what kind of data and results do you need to see to really convince you of the time savings value of a product, which could, you know, it could turn over an operating room faster. It could get a patient out of a hospital center. I mean, are people coming to you with that kind of data?
I can tell you what I want to see, and I can give you an example and a story. So again, you know, I'm this quality dude, and so, you know, anything that helps reduce harm or infections gets me excited. It's just an issue with me, and so. If somebody comes in with a value statement without data, it's a difficult conversation. It's a difficult conversation because it's a story without any substance. And you know, I'm looking down at the screen of like, what is our panel supposed to be doing up here? And it's innovation, collaboration, and partnering. And so that we've got this technology in my hospital, and we went through those exact steps. And it's this RTLS system. and then we've got these dispensers. And both companies said, hey, we partnered, and we can make these things work in sync, and you can take and measure your hand hygiene compliance. So I was like, that's great, because that's something that's difficult for us to measure. It's a piece of fiction that we post as compliance rates in our hospital. But I said, where's your data? And so it was a little silence. It's kind of quiet, just like this room right now. And the partnering part, and this is the good thing, is they said, we don't have it, but would you help us find it and do that? So I was on the phone yesterday, finalizing, I think, the location to do the simulation work at the University of North Texas in their simulation center, where we can set up, this simulated environment, detects the boundaries of this technology. Does it deliver? Because at the same time, I called the president of the DFW Hospital Council and asked, who's doing hand hygiene in this area? So I'm doing my research, because I'm not going to spend those dollars in the organization and then own a bad product that comes in the door. And I find out from someone, within HCA, that they brought a different product in with the promise to do this, and it fell flat and cost someone some bonus points or something. You don't want to do that in a for-profit system, I think, or any kind of system, because dollars are so scarce. But I think the partnering part, if you've got a product, and if you can partner with an organization that has a research mission, it's a nice thing to do, especially if it helps you market your product at other organizations. It helps you build a stronger relationship, and then you've got a piece of data, with a methodology that's sometimes peer-reviewed and published. That's strong. That's a strong thing to come in with, and especially you develop a partnership, then you almost have like a sales partner with you. So that's just something, if you look down at the title of our panel, this innovation, collaboration, partnering, that's what comes to mind.
Well, I think it's also really important that everyone understands the needs of the people you're talking to. So I'd like to go back to your comment, Dr. Nunes. How do they bug you in a way that doesn't bug you?
I'm sorry.
How do they bug you? You said you want them to know how to properly bug you. What's the right time to talk to you? Probably clearly not when you're walking into an operating room, but...
Definitely. Let me answer that by prefacing, preface that question, the answer to that question with this statement. Healthcare systems and physicians are on this journey to try and prevent readmissions to the hospital. We're on a journey to try and better take care of our patients so that they don't get admitted into the hospital. And any product that can help a healthcare system or a physician practice achieve those kinds of things is something that we're always going to pay attention to. So, to answer your question, as a gynecologist, I work in the office about 2/3 of the time. I'm in the operating room the other part of the time. And I also do a lot of procedures in my office. So, hospital systems are actually sort of on this journey to actually put fewer people in the hospital. So if we're on a journey to put fewer people in the hospital, that means hospitals are actually going to shrink. And so their staffing requirements are going to shrink. And if we're not going to be readmitting them, that means we're going to be taking better care of them when they get out of the hospital. So any product that you can do will help. I'll give you a small example. There's an infection in this world called Clostridia difficile. And Clostridia difficile is a bacteria that lives in our intestines. But if a doctor gives you antibiotics because you have pneumonia, sometimes that C. difficile will grow because the antibiotics that we gave you killed the normal protection that you have in your colon. And C. difficile kills and causes bloody diarrhea. So the Centers for CMS, Medicare, I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember the acronym for them, but Health and Human Services, they're on this journey that they don't want us to be causing CMS. We're having to do this test in the hospital when they come in to make sure that it wasn't our fault, because if it's our fault, then the hospital doesn't get paid for that hospitalization. They don't make any money at all. Doesn't matter how long the patient's in the hospital. So there was a time when we were culturing all these people to come in because some of those people came in already colonized with C. diff. And then what happened, the doctors reacted in a way, oh my God, they're colonized with C. diff. We better give them this really expensive antibiotic. And all of a sudden, our costs went through the roof. And so what we discovered was that there was a better test out there in the market to determine, well, which C. difficile was it? That little piece of technology, I don't know where it came from. I don't know which company figured it out. Now we're using it across the system, so now we can determine, hey, this C. difficile isn't the bad one. This isn't the one that we're going to treat. We're not going to worry about it anymore. And in fact, we're not even going to test the patients anymore. That's how we evolved. Now we quit testing. That technology made a difference. And it's products like that that are going to save hospital admissions, hospital readmissions. Those are the products that we're looking for.
So Tony, what would you think of would be an example of something that you think is an unmet need? I mean, you've got dollars you need to spend, there's problems. What solutions are you not being brought?
Oh, gosh.
And that's a tough one, I know.
So this is a technology discussion. The ones that come to mind right away are on the service side. From a technology perspective, I don't know if someone has a solution to help us determine the right technologies to use for the right conditions, or some software or something, and to help determine, what the appropriate approach or the most clinically effective approach. And I'll give you an example. So this is sort of an old one. Clogged arteries. Many years ago, crack the chest, do a bypass. Today it's a pill.
Right.
Well, there's still surgeons that like to crack chests, but we know how many lives that the medication has saved. But there are other conditions. I'm not a clinician, and so I can't spout them off, but there are other conditions where just a completely different approach, rather than taking someone into the operating room, maybe the solution is to do nothing, but where's the data that, where's that data that can help us sift through that? And that is a big need, and I think we all struggle with that.
Sure.
So,
Impartial data, so you're not getting a
impartial
vendor's
data.
perspective. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
love somebody to invent a less expensive robot.
oh, gosh, yes.
Da Vinci has a monopoly on robotic surgery in this country, and I went through the training process, and most of my surgeries, probably 90% of them are robotic, but I know how to do the surgery without a robot. But it's made my life easier. So from that product perspective, why do I like the robot? Because ergonomically, it's not going to hurt my shoulders. It's actually, I think, prolonged my surgical career. I like the fact that the patients have less pain, and so I love the product. What I don't love is the price tag, and what I don't like is the price tag of the replacement equipment and the lives of the arms that we use in the robot. I wish it had competition. I love competition. It's America. But I wish someone would come up with a product that would save money in that particular market. The other thing, too, that bothers hospitals and physicians both is this drugs that used to be generic used to be a lot less expensive. And I wish that there was a software program out there that I could always press a button that would always point me in the right direction so that my patients could go and get their drugs for the least amount of money. Because what used to cost, I mean, you've heard the stories in the news, the EpiPen used to cost about $120, and some entrepreneur got a hold of the company. It is America, after all. And all of a sudden, the price of the EpiPen went up to $800 or $900 per pen. And a lot of patients out there really simply couldn't afford it. And I can tell you from experience that some birth control pills 1 month cost $30 a month, and the next month they cost $5 a month. And from one insurance company to from one insurance company to another pharmaceutical company to one on the corner drugstore, prices change. You can cross the street and the price is different. And I wish there was some clarity or some way that I could figure out how my patients could actually find their drugs for the least amount of money. I think, I won't speak for you, but from a supply chain, God, if I were sitting in your shoes, wouldn't it be nice to have a program where all I had to do was go look and find, well, I need sheets. Click, this is the best supplier and the cheapest supplier. I can remember we used to buy always from one company. We used to have these contracts where, in my company, we used to buy a lot of supplies from one company. Why? Because we thought it was efficient. We thought it was better. We discovered recently, gosh, it's not better. It's not cheaper. So we've gone back to buying from various vendors because we now have the capability of being able to seek out the best price and get the least amount. But that means I have to have an employee that's doing that. And I didn't used to have that.
Right, right. Well, before I ask more questions, do we have some questions from the audience that any of you would like to ask? Come forward. Is it not? Is it
On the front top. There you go.
Mention understanding what you need before you bring a product in or before you get into deep discussions. I am a startup and I'm at the prototype stage, and it's going to cost about $120,000 for our solution, which is in the patient adherence arena. So I've been doing what I would call pre-customer interviews. So I'd like to get advice from you to make sure that I'm building what people need before anyone invests or before I invest in that. What is the best way to come into an organization like yours and be able to get feedback to make sure that as we're building, that we build something that you actually want and can use and actually will solve the problem that we're trying to solve?
Well, I think coming one way, not the only way, one way is, I think the supply chain has a very broad overview of what's happening. And if we're not currently trying to source something in an area, we can certainly point you to the leadership or the leaders that are responsible for whatever your product is, and they would be able to assist you.
From my perspective, and I'll use both Baylor and Texas Health Resources, we have a lot of employed physicians in the marketplace that we didn't used to have. Baylor has their large employed group, Texas Health has their large employed group, but there's still a lot of independent aligned physicians. But imagine if you could get in to talk to someone that is on the clinical side in a leadership position in one of those large employed physician groups, because their goal is patient adherence. So you've got to find someone in their respective leadership positions. The chief medical officer would be a good place to start, I think, because they're going to be a physician. They know what the goals of their physician organizations are. They know that they want better compliance on hemoglobin A1Cs. They want patients coming in. I think they'd be super interested in whatever your company could provide, because if it drives compliance, that return on investment for that physician organization is huge, because if the hemoglobin A1C scores across the board are lower, then the government and the private commercial insurance companies will leave money on the table for them that they can use. If the compliance is poor, they make less money. So you're in a good niche, but you're going to, my suggestion is go to the chief medical officers. Let them drive the conversation when it comes to the purchasing.
Did you have some thoughts? You were writing notes.
Yeah, I do. Anyway, thanks. I love the idea and energy around startups. I'm sure you've read it, but if you haven't, Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, is one of the best books on entrepreneurship and innovation. It's small. tonight I'm flying to New Orleans to see my daughter, who's a junior in college, who's one of her 2 majors is in entrepreneurship, and that book is in my suitcase for her. So it's an excellent book, and it adopts, if you've listened to Peter Thiel talk, it's a contrarian view. So you don't want to be one among many. You don't want to open a restaurant in San Francisco because it's going to be the best restaurant in San Francisco. You want to find the gap where the question is still being asked. You want to be a monopoly, even if it's a small monopoly. You want to adopt a contrarian view when you take and develop and bring a product to market. The other piece that I think is really important, this morning I had I get to ride bikes with my friends on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and so I'm with this friend of mine, and she's took a startup, and it's on earwax, and it's how to remove earwax, and so she had a product and this concept and this idea, but she started fundamentally, like, she didn't go into close a gap, because there's some products out there that are not that great. Like, I don't know, this ear candle thing, I don't know about that, but
Oh, I know about that.
it just sounds funny to me. But so she would develop this contrarian view. She's read Peter Thiel's books, but she started with some really rigorous work that was done at the bench in one of our universities. So she went through an IRB. She actually paid to have that done, and then brought a very rigorous methodology to take and get some solid foundational work. So you're doing some focus groups, it sounds like, but just be really rigorous about it, because you're going to be hanging your hat on that for the next couple of years. So I would be very disciplined about that investment and focus. So those are things I think about, and where I've seen people have success with that. So I hope that helps.
Just a couple other thoughts. And I'll go back to diabetes. Diabetics are supposed to have retinal eye exams, at least annually. It's really hard to get them in to do that. And even when they do get in, oftentimes the specialist, the ophthalmologist, fails to get that information back to the primary care physician to enter that into the electronic health records. So then the health information exchange can pull out that data and go, hey, these doctors are doing their job. Somebody figured out that how to market a retinal camera that is now going into the offices of primary care physicians. They take the picture in the office, a medical aide can do it, a secretary can take the picture, and it gets sent electronically to Southwestern Medical School. The ophthalmologist looks at it and says the patient's fine or the patient is not fine. Now compliance is going out, is improving because of that product, and someone's smart enough to market that idea to physicians so they could come in compliance to meet that goal. The other thing I'm reading about in some of the articles that I get is how can a patient check their sugar at home without having to get blood out of their finger? They get tired of doing that. Wouldn't it be nice to have, Google has a thing that it's not yet out, but they're going to supposedly put on a contact. You can measure sugar 24 hours a day. The other one is there's a device you can put on your finger, and it should be able measure through the skin without taking any blood to measure the amount of sugar in their bloodstream. Those are really cool little tools. What would be even better is if they're using it at home, and it sends the information electronically to the electronic health record, and if there's an abnormality, a little alarm goes off. That would be awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions from the audience? Just one. No? All right, well, I'm going to ask one last question. So what would each of you in your roles say is the hardest thing you deal with when dealing with the vendor community? I mean, there's got to be that rub. I mean, what's the tough thing?
Which community?
With the vendor community, people trying to sell you or onboard products.
Oh, I'll go first on that. So what wrinkles me all up is, in my current role, and even for a little while before that, I think, we've talked about rigor, solving really important clinical problems, bringing in innovation to improve care. efficiencies, things that that sound good here, but like a hunting trip somewhere, to take and get a product into a hospital, and when somebody comes up to me, one of the other medical staff, and said, hey, listen, this robot person is doing this like trip somewhere, and why don't you come along? Like, I just don't like any part of that. That gets me all wrinkled up, so. I
Well,
think
current
that's
laws
kind
kind of stop a lot of that, so.
yeah, but it's kind of like it's below the surface. So, anyway, it's not well received in my environment.
I'll ditto that comment. What gets me all upset is when someone comes in, and this may be a generational thing. I mean, I'm not too far away from retirement, but I'm fully aware of the sales pitches, the vocabulary, the questions, the phrases that are typically used by vendors to get my attention. And it's always the same pattern, and it's irritating. And so when someone comes to me and says, now, Dr. Nunez, will you use this product? Oh, please don't ask me that question, because it just, what, do you really want an answer? Because I wish when sales force are being trained, and it's not my area of expertise, I would prefer a low-key, persistent type of approach where you bring your product up in front of me over and over again, because that's what I do appreciate. I appreciate you coming by, but what I don't appreciate is a hard sell. And so from that perspective, most physicians don't have the time to hear more than a 20-second spiel because we're too doggone busy during the day, or we have other things that are important during our clinical day. So keep it short. Don't be too provocative. Don't ask repetitive, dumb questions that are going to where you're going to get an answer that you're not going to like.
Right. And Tony.
Gosh, I could give you a list on this one. I think at the top of the list is not overtly but covertly trying to fracture alignments that we have around what's the best to do for our patients. When we select products, they're big winners. And we are looking at it very system-wide at this point instead of hospital by hospital by hospital. So if you win big. But conversely, there are also those that have their products removed from the shelf as a result of this. But these decisions are made by physicians, and they're made system-wide. And we've had suppliers that basically go on the offense, and they really stir up a lot of dissension within the organization. And sometimes they're just talking dollars and cents. The physicians make a decision. The supplier that's losing may be 2 or 3x the price of the one that's winning, but the other has a superior product. And they still go out and they stir up trouble with visiting physicians or with staff, and that causes problems. Yes.
Okay. Well, with that, we're at the end of our panel, and I think, sure. And then we're going to, after this, take a break before, I believe, our lunch.
Sorry, one question. I wanted to follow up. You made a comment, sorry about that. Whoa. Throw that there. About the certain keywords that kind of trigger you, right? So reverse that. What would be something that would actually pique your interest in that 20-second pitch if somebody comes up with their product and says, what are the things that would spark your ears and further
This is a better product because of A, B, C, D, tick it off, and if there's a price benefit, tick that off, and do that in 20 seconds. Okay. People come to my office, I come to visit the doctors all the time. Don't beat around the bush. Our time is too valuable. A, B, C, D, do it that quick, and I'm gonna go, wow, that's great. thank you, leave the information, and then it's okay to ask me, is there someone in your corporation that I should talk to? You can ask that, and I'll point you in the right direction. If you don't ask that question, I will point you in that right direction anyway. Doctors that work in large groups like or large employed groups, they're going to point you quickly to someone else, because I would rather you talk to that person than talk to me. Because in my corporation, the person you're going to talk to is another doctor that's in charge of making those decisions. And so we have that person. You don't know that. You're coming into my office saying, here's a product. Your sales force is doing exactly what they want to do, but you don't know where to go yet. And the other thing that I would suggest in that 20 seconds is ask, if I can't talk to you, who can I talk to? Okay, a lot of times I forget to ask that question. And if they don't ask, I'm too busy. I'm just moving on, because I'm right in the middle of seeing patients during the day.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Please go visit our sponsors at the break, and we'll see you back here shortly for our lunch.
Tony? Pleasure, sir.